Welcome to Hawkins Talkins. I'm Mr. Seifu, the counselor, your host, where I aim to enhance and advance your mind. I don't profess to have all the answers, but I do have a plethora of ideas, thoughts, opinions, and musings that will stimulate your mind. In today's curious conversation, we will be discussing identity and the importance of naming and renaming. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Curious Conversation segment, in which we were discussing identity and the importance of naming and renaming. True story. To show you the importance of hip hop and popular culture when it's done correct. Follow me. I'm from the era to when School Days and the Cosby shows, and we had popular culture that was promoting HBCUs. Black people were able to see, really for the first time, Black people put in a light that was like our true reality, or something at least close to it. I mention all that because on my way to deciding where I was going to go to college, it was a lot of popular culture that influenced my decisions. And seeing step shows and those movies made many of us wanted to be in fraternities and sororities. And I support them. You know, most of my friends and peers are in frats and sorors, right? But here comes hip hop in the brand Nubians. Peace to Lord Jamar, because in one of the songs, I made an important decision. He said in his song, I ain't down with a frat because I ain't no Greek. Knowledge from a black man is what you seek. That line right there made me decide, I'll support the frats and sorors, but I just wish it would be African names. Follow me. The Greeks, who we all know now is the great father of Greek history, Herodotus, said that yes, they sat at the feet of the Egyptians, Black people, for those who are still historically incorrect, and learned from us. So why? And I get it. But now in the age of woke people, we're in 2020. We need collective mental health too, which gets me to the point of naming and identity. No, I don't want to get rid of frats or sorors. We need to keep doing what they do because they do plenty of outreach work. They're great. But what would be the power if we started to re-Africanize the names of the frats and sororities? For instance, Q Dogs. They now going to be the Mau Maus. The Kappas be, let's say, the Ashantis. Let's say the AKAs will be the Nzingas. You feel me? It is just like when we see Black folks here re-Africanizing themselves through naming their children African names and the power it gives them in loving who they are, being that we do live in a place that we are constantly bombarded with negative images of being African or Black. So again, I want you to think about the power of that. Cultural therapy. What does the globe start to say when we say, wow, they are proud to be African people again? I ain't down with the frat because I ain't no Greek. Knowledge of a black man is what you seek. That right there stopped me from joining a fraternity. A line from Lord Jamar, Brand Nubian. Real talk. Nothing against fraternities and sororities, but we was woke back in the 90s and we haven't been asleep since then, because hip hop was really some of our true first master degrees and PhDs. Literally, I can say I've learned more through hip hop than my multiple degrees. Literally, it has directed me naming my children, me deciding what groups or affiliations I would have. That one line. Now, if I went to a HBCU and they said join the Mau Mau's, I would have joined that group. I would have joined a fraternity if, let's say, I could have joined the Mau Mau's or the Ashantis or the Zulus. I would have joined. I just don't understand how we empower the people that oppress us and have colonized us and continue to celebrate them by calling ourselves their names. How do you think that the global white world looks to say, hey, they're woke, but they still call themselves by European names? Their societies are European name societies. Their lakes, their monuments aren't African in origin. They're usually celebrating European holidays and such. Before we get individual therapy, we need collective therapy. And part of our collective therapy could be in renaming schools, societies, groups that push our cultural worldview as African people globally. See, we're not going to localize it anymore because we know that that was the trick. That's why we call this segment the Scariest Conversation. See, when we have that conversation with African Americans, Nigerians, Jamaicans, Haitians, all African people that got off at different bus stops, that's all it is. So all those names we made it fly where we ended up in colonialism, but we're all African people. So you can play with the names if you want. If you're from the Caribbean, you're saying that you're only 400 to 500 years old. That's when we really, in terms of European enslavement, started to call ourselves as the islands that we ended up on. We didn't choose those places. We didn't choose the United States. We didn't choose the Caribbean. We didn't choose Brazil, or at least at that time, because we know Black people are global. But don't let me digress in my historical correctness. The purpose of this segment is to talk about the importance of a name and how we can start to heal ourselves by renaming. All my fraternity and sorority friends, nothing against you. I love y'all just the same. And y'all throw hell of a party. I support all of y'all. But that would be a power move in the 21st century to rename our fraternities and sororities African names. I know many here in this segment would say, we are Afro-Indigenous. We're Moors. We're not African. We're melanated people. Global white supremacy doesn't ask all those questions. So if you want to try out who and what you are, try it out with the police. And if you're a melanated person, they're going to treat you like an African. Whether you Christian, Muslim, Rasta, atheist, Nigerian, Haitian, Californian, you get the picture. Global Black people unite for our mental and cultural health. Welcome back to Hawkins Talkins, and we are now on the domain of discourse segment. We'll be discussing today the recruiting scandal in NCAA basketball. We know that sports in America, especially collegiate sports, still built on the backs of Black athletes. Those are the most famous ones, and those are the ones that we go to watch mostly, we have to admit. When we look at the percentage of Division I basketball players, which I believe is about 56%. All that being said, it's a billion-dollar industry. Just recently, there were 10 arrests and 2 federal trials involving assistant coaches and a couple runners for agents. But as you guessed, in this billion-dollar business, 7 out of the 9 arrested were Black. No head coaches, no university presidents, no multi-million-dollar alumni or alumnus, but the assistant coaches and the runners. That's consistent. That has been what we have come to understand about being Black in a dominant white society. Now, if we're going to make lemonade out the lemons that we get, here's one of my suggestions. If we look at major collegiate sports, the colleges wouldn't exist without the revenue that athletics bring in. So kind of what we discussed earlier in the scariest conversation, if we could start in the 21st century, Black people globally start to commit to HBCUs, all that revenue would be at our schools. If you look at all the old Ivy League schools, which are, some of the oldest schools the oldest schools in the United States, it took them 300 to 400 years to become what they are now. And if we continue on the trajectory of building HBCUs, we can have that or better, but we have to be consistent with that. So, okay, follow me. The coaches arrested were Chuck Persons from Auburn, Lamont Evans from South Carolina, Emmanuel Richards from Arizona, and Anthony Bland from USC. And just like if they were in the hood, all 4 eventually pleaded guilty to bribery. We don't like to take stuff to court because this country will hit you with a 20 to 25 year sentence. So, follow me. We already see that it's a billion-dollar industry. Those coaches need to go to the HBCUs and start coaching. Like my man, Kenny Anderson, Queens native, coach at Fisk University. That's big. Now, let's say each of the NBA players start to commit to a school. And when they have their progeny, like LeBron, how you already have Bronny committing to Krzyzewski at Duke? If you really want to see how much America mess with you, let your son go to Howard. I don't even want to talk about that because that would be scary. That's another scariest conversation. But think about that. What if Dwayne Wade's son went to Jackson State? What if Zion Williamson went to Hampton? All that money would be at our school. The Zion Cams would be at the HBCUs. But we see, as we talked about earlier, that identity and naming problem still taints our thinking and our decisions. It's 2019, and at first they didn't even allow us into their universities. And now we're making all the money for them. Slavery under any name is still slavery, whether you call it feudalism, serfdom, NCAA. We're $1 billion industry and just getting a pittance from it. We need to be culturally stingy. We need to start committing to ourselves and stop doing things for the world to like us and do things for our benefit. So watching these men arrested, the more the things change, the more they stay the same. We watched it during the crack epidemics. They didn't lock up Oliver North. They didn't lock up any of the government officials who were bringing drugs in. They locked up Free Ray Ricky Ross, who was just a middleman. So just like in the NCAA, they only got the low-hanging fruit. Nobody of significance. NCAA will continue to exploit Black athletes as long as we allow them to. We have to start making a change. Commit to HBCUs, take our sports and entertainment, and we will change our reality just like that. Something to think about. The other obvious thing in this, the 10 arrests and the 2 federal trials were Will Wade of LSU and Sean Miller of Arizona were both implicated on wiretaps and surveillance recordings. And of course, they still have their jobs. They're still working there. And let's not forget Rick Pitino, who's had a plethora of violations. You know, they just, like police officers, they can kill somebody Black and go work in another country, see it? Or rather another state, excuse me. It doesn't matter. The same system, the same foundation gives you the same results. And of course, white privilege did prevail in these trials because we have Will Wade of LSU and Sean Miller of Arizona who were implicated in wiretaps and surveillance recordings. They still have their job. They're still working. They both make over $1 million easily. But you fired 4 assistant coaches. But let me tell you the secret behind why 56% of the assistant coaches at the major universities are Black. Why are they Black? Those Black assistant coaches have the relationships with the Black community because that's where most of them are from. So some of that recruiting that some of those white head coaches couldn't do, they do got to get dudes from the hood that's from there. They can talk to their parents and talk to the students in our lingo, in our jargon, and get them to come to the school. That's the secret behind having those 56% of assistant coaches. And as they try to move up the ranks, most of those coaches, as Lynn Elmore, who's an analyst, a lawyer, a former collegiate player and NBA player. I think he said it best in the article is most of those assistant coaches are judged by their recruiting and not their coaching. So they'll move you up the ranks quicker by who you can recruit versus your skill set as a coach. Man, let's just take it all to the HBCU so we can have our first HBCU national champion. in football and basketball in the 21st century. Everybody go home. And since we're on that sentiment, all our World Cup players, go play for your national country. Don't play for France, England, and Spain no more. Play for Nigeria. Play for Ghana. Play from where you're from. And that's not hating on those other countries, but Nowitzki plays for Germany. Gasol goes home and plays for Spain. Because they're proud of where they're from. And I think when we start going home, guess what? We bring money to our countries. I know it is very difficult for a lot of those players to go home because the teams don't have the finances to support them. But if we start going to play for our national teams, we start to generate money. And over time, we can make that a norm.